Tyler, which player in this postseason, and this doesn't have to be a guy who's still in the field, we're including eliminated players here, do you think has been most overly criticized or most underappreciated?
If you don't know my answer by now, uh, you don't know me well enough.
Rudy!
It's funny because last time I was on the show, I think you asked me which player do I think has the best chance to rewrite the narrative with a great playoff run. And Rudy Gobert did that, and it didn't work. So it's like what are we doing? In Phoenix, it was like, okay, we're gonna stretch Gobert, and he's switching across the board. He's blitzing and hedging pick and roll. He's covering everything. He had an immense defensive impact and got like 2 blocks the entire series. So there goes that narrative. They go into the Nuggets series. The Wolves have a better plus minus with him on the court versus off the court in all 6 of their games that he played. On the series, they were like -40 with him off the floor, plus 50 with him on the floor. He's again doing everything. In Game 7, he was hedging and blitzing Jamal in the pick and roll. He was baiting Jokic into turnovers with the lobs. He was shutting off the paint from the best paint scoring team in the league. And you have people on ESPN saying he should be benched. You have Draymond Green saying they went on a run with him on the bench, which wasn't even true. So I think it's just utterly absurd how he gets talked about relative to how good he is. I think he's at worst a top 3 defender of the last like 12 years. And he did a lot offensively in that series, like getting his team in the bonus 2 different quarters with more than 8 minutes to go. Those crucial offensive rebounds, Rudy Nowitzki on the fadeaway. Like, come on, man. That is the most disrespected player I've ever seen in my lifetime. And another guy I thought of was Joel Embiid, because I think one knee, can't even control a side of his face. Had no lift, couldn't use his pull-up jumper the entire series because he had no lift. To go out and drop 33 on 60% true shooting, and for your team to utterly dominate the series every time you're on the court, we just need to give more love to Embiid, man, because the way he gets talked about for how generational he is just it's really sad.
The Rudy thing, man. There's always going to be people that hate Rudy, and I honestly think it's a good test of how you think of Rudy. Rudy's always going to get hated on for a few reasons. One, I think it's his personality. Like, I don't think he's got the most endearing personality. Two, I think people are still holding grudges that he was touching the mics at that presser that one time, man. You know, when Rudy Gobert single-handedly started COVID.
Yeah.
Well, and then I
Sad
said this.
but true.
I said this on the show last time. Rudy might be like the least aesthetically pleasing offensive player ever. He's uncoordinated. He has no hands. There were so many times in the series, bro, where Gobert would get stripped on like a layup attempt by Jokic, and I'm just screaming inside like, wow, like your boy set you up for such an easy shot, and you still screwed the pooch there, Rudy. So he's flawed as a basketball player, but like if you think he's trash, like I just don't think you understand the game. Like I do think that he gets unfairly criticized just because of those shortcomings or his personality. And like I think all the other great things that he does as a basketball player kind of get overlooked. Like he is one of the greatest rim protectors ever. This is a 4-time defensive player of the year. And like I think we talked about this one episode you were on, Tyler. Like he transformed the Jazz, who had 0+ perimeter defenders, into the best defense in the league. Like, that's not that long ago, man. It just happens that he has a surplus of great defenders around him now. And that is what creates this Voltron of one of the greatest defenses in NBA history. Like, Rudy's never going to get his due love. The same thing with Draymond. I think Draymond gets consistently overly criticized. I think the defensive-minded first guys are always going to, and Draymond's got his own personality things that I think people take issue with, but he's one of the greatest defenders of all time. I think that archetype is always going to kind of get criticized. And I think Embiid's a great pick too. I'm a part of that. I think there are little things that Embiid can do differently that would make him a much better offensive player. Like, I think he does get overly criticized, but one thing, like, we talk about Halliburton and how the team takes his offensive philosophy and his personality and it permeates through to the entirety of the offense. I think there's a thing with Embiid too where like Philly's offense can stagnate a little bit, and he's a great offensive player and he always gets his, and I think he is still criticized more than he should be, but the ball stops a little bit. There's not as much movement, right? I think the Philly offense could be a little better for as great as a player he is, right? Taking care of double teams better. But also, like you said, Tyler, damn, man, can we cut the guy a little slack? Like, he got diagnosed with Bell's palsy, man. He's dealing with a bum knee, and he still produces. I think those are great picks. And the last guy I'll give a shout-out to, I'm not super plugged into NBA Twitter normally because it just pisses me off when I read opinions. SGA, I'll say. Carson, you've been filling me in on consistent SGA criticism, and I just... It baffles me. It actually baffles me as a basketball fan. Like, I don't know how you could take issue with anything SGA did in these playoffs, man. I thought he was really impressive for a guy on, the first time where he's really on the big stage. I thought SGA almost played perfectly through these first 2 rounds. Like, I don't get how you could take any issue with what he did in these playoffs.
Phenomenal choices, gentlemen. Phenomenal. Gobert, Logan, I think you hit the nail on the head. Basketball fans at large will never give adequate appreciation to defensive first players. Like, I think there are a lot of people who will look you in the eye and tell you that they think Jamal Crawford is a better basketball player than Rudy Gobert or Draymond Green because he's tough as hell, bro. Because that bag is crazy. But ultimately, it's never going to be aesthetically pleasing. And I do want to be clear. There are some people who I think greatly overstate Rudy's offensive value. And they talk about how great he is as a screener. He is a very good screener. But then they'll point to things like his scoring efficiency. And it's like, just watch the game and watch how hesitant Ant is to make any sort of pass to Rudy off the roll. Because if he gets tagged, like, look at what happens, dude. Like, he freaks out. He gets stripped. He misses these short-range touch shots. Maybe he draws a foul. Drawing a foul is the best-case scenario where he's just too big and he doesn't have to attempt an actual field goal. But it's like, no, he limits you offensively. But there is such overwhelming value defensively. And Minnesota's so great. Part of what cements them as such a special defense to me is how amazing they were in game 2, how hellacious an effort that was, their rotations, their collective hands, their physicality without Gobert on the floor. But of course, he's vital to a lot of what they do great, and I thought was really good throughout this series. And everybody gets on him for not being able to guard Jokic in the post. Nobody does it. And by the way, that's where I want to give extra credit to Cat, because I think Cat guards Jokic straight up as a post defender as well, if not better than anybody on the planet. And it is just a question of like that sheer strength that he has that Rudy doesn't quite have. But it is so rare that Rudy is exposed as a one-on-one defender. I mean, he's never exposed. It's just rare that he is able to be attacked. And Jokic was going at him in his masterclass in game 5 because they weren't sending help. And so that was the one matchup where he didn't have to deal with Gobert as a backline defender, and he didn't have to deal with help, and he just felt like he could score on anybody one-on-one. He was a super effective isolation defender this year. I do think Rudy just defensively is misunderstood. Offensive criticisms, I'm here. I'm part of them. Defensively, the dude is really special. Embiid, to me, it just comes down to the guy at his best playoff series probably ever, and he did it in incredibly difficult health circumstances. I have been a big critic of playoff Embiid in the past. This is the year where it's just like, I mean, he balled out overall. There were things like we saw the decision-making break down in that one game. We did see him struggle in fourth quarters. I don't think it was a perfect Embiid series at all, but considering the circumstances, it was a positive. SGA is the dude who I had written down, Logan, just because people hate SGA. Like, people just get fixed on these opinions and they never move off of them. When we're talking about Timberwolves, another guy is Cat. Cat is never going to get his just due. He's never going to get his credit for being, like, clearly Minnesota's best offensive player in game 7, but just being really good over the course of this playoff run, being so valuable offensively as like the greatest three-point shooting big ever, and with his mismatch attacking and his playmaking, defending at such a high level, people just don't like him. And so they'll always move the credit somewhere else. SGA, I just don't even know how people were critical of him. Like, his volume and efficiency as a scorer, and not just that, like, his playmaking in the Dallas series I thought was quite good. It was just guys around him struggled to make shots. And defensively, Tyler, I was glad to see that you tweeted about this, because I was not expecting the SGA as an off-ball defender disaster narrative to pop up, because I thought it was so clear that OKC was willingly, as a matter of scheme, loading up with help on the rolls and on drives and leaving those corner shooters. I don't know how people developed the narrative that SGA was just like doing that on a whim, but his impact as a defensive playmaker, as a help defender, was really pronounced in that series. And I just think he's a top 5 guy. I think he cemented that. So a lot of good choices there, folks.